Hey everyone, today we are going to be starting our new unit, which is going to be Unit 4. In this unit, we talk about different types of textiles, flooring, window treatments, lighting, that kind of thing. I am not going to require you to turn in a note guide for this unit. However, my advice to you would be to print off the note guide and to follow along and to fill it out as we go. The reason for this is because I'm going to be giving you an assignment. Your final project in this class is going to require you to list different types of flooring and window treatments and that kind of stuff that you use for a client that you'll be designing for. And it will be easier if you just go through your note guide instead of having to go through and like rewatch this entire lesson to remember which ones are which. So my advice would be to write these down, and the note guide would be the easiest way to do this, just so you have like the definitions and that kind of stuff. And that way you can use it as a reference when you go back and do your project in like a month or so. So you do not need to turn a note packet in. However, if you take notes, it will help you in the future, and you can just go ahead and print off the note guide and fill it out as we go, and then you'll have that. You can be able to use that as we go on. So, I'm sorry, this textiles is one of my least favorite subjects to talk about. It's kind of boring. I can usually make it pretty interesting in class and make it something that you guys are able to relate to. However, since I'm not able to be in class and you can't see my facial expressions or hear my stories and that kind of stuff, it's going to be kind of dull and boring, and I apologize for that. So just bear with me. We'll go through it quickly, and then we'll move on to flooring and light and that kind of things. So you have two different kinds of fibers. You have natural and man-made. Natural fibers are going to be any kind of fiber that comes from nature or the earth. So any kind of plant, any kind of grain, any kind of seed, and also anything that comes from an animal. So you've got things like leather is going to be a natural source, wool is going to be a natural source, silk is going to be a natural source because it comes from a silkworm, those kinds of things. Some, if you have any animal sources, those can definitely, it depends on what your whole belief system is on if like you're going to wear animals or not. Some do, the animal does die to provide that fiber for you. Some do not. As an example, a silkworm just spins the silk. They don't kill the worm. The sheep, they're just sheared though, so it doesn't hurt the sheep. It actually is helpful for the sheep. The sheep need to be sheared so they don't, gain too much weight in their fur and then they die. So it's actually very helpful. However, if you wear anything like leather or skin of any kind, obviously the animal died to provide that. So just so you are aware. So your natural sources are going to come from plants and animals. And then after that, you have your natural fibers are separated into two different categories. So these are still your natural fibers, meaning they come from the earth. Okay, but they do get separated into two different categories. One being protein fibers, and these come from animals. The way I kind of remember this is you always think about when you're eating food and you're eating protein, that's usually an animal source, like eggs, meat, dairy, that kind of stuff that all came from animals, and that's where you get your protein when you eat it. The same thing when it comes to fibers. If it's a protein fiber, it means it came from an animal. So some examples I showed in this PowerPoint would be like silk bedding and a silk wall if you want to be that extra. Also wool armchairs, leather couches, those all came from animals. Now remember, you can buy, if you are against the killing of animals to provide fibers, you can buy faux fur and faux leather, FYI, just so you are aware, but it is less durable. So your protein fibers come from animals. Your cellulose fibers come from plants. So some examples I put on are like a linen couch, a silk bamboo rug, which by the way is crazy expensive. I looked up the price of that silk bamboo rug and it's like $12,000. An acetate headboard, all of those come from plants. Okay, then you have your manufactured or synthetic fibers. This means these are man-made, meaning that they are made with chemicals and solvents. And so some examples would be like your olefin carpet, your acrylic area rug, your nylon polyester upholstery. Anything that's not natural is going to be man-made. These are cheaper fabrics because they take less manpower, and it takes they can produce them at much higher rates. and they have a lot of machinery that can run these into, and they can be mass produced a lot easier than if you were to do natural fibers. So these are going to be a lot more affordable. So you may find yourself when you are buying pieces for a home or a living space in the future that your man-made or your synthetic fibers are going to be a lot more affordable. Here you have your different kinds of weaves. We're just going to go through these really fast. You have your plain weave. This is formed by interlacing yarns one over one under in a regular sequence. It is simple and it wears evenly. If you look at the picture, you can tell that it goes under one, over one, under one, over one, under one, over one, under one, over one, until you finished your weave. You have your twill weave, which is formed by floating one warp thread over two or three. And so it's like over two, under one, or over two, under two, over two, under two, over two, under two. The way that I always remember this one is that twill starts with TW and two starts with TW. So that's how I always remember that weave. This creates a diagonal well, and it creates a stronger, more firm fabric with a visible diagonal line if you were to look closely at the fibers. Then you have your satin weave. This is created by floating one warp thread over 4 or more weft yarns. Sorry, if you guys haven't, let me back up real quick. The way you can tell which threads are warp and weft is it technically is going right, but this little rhyme helps me a little bit. The threads that are going crossed horizontal, so in this picture, the blue ones, that's your weft. And so I always say weft goes left. Yes, it is technically going right, but the weft goes left, and then the warp is your vertical. So that's how I always know that one. So this one is when you have one warp thread over 4 or more weft yarns. Okay, and you can tell the red ones are floating over quite a few of the blue ones. And this creates an interlacing which is staggered, so the result is a smooth face with no wells. The float gives the satin fabric a really nice shine and sheen. Okay, then we have our next one, which is going to be a jacquard weave. This one I always remember because jacquard is a really fancy word, and this is a really fancy weave. It's an intricate, variated weave made by lifting any number of warp threads and any number of weft threads to create a woven pattern in the fabric. These weaves are created on a jacquard loom, and they create brocades, tapestries, damask, and they are used for draperies and upholsteries. Okay, let's go over fabric finishes. This is what they put these on top of fabric to create certain characteristics of fabric. So the example would be the picture that I show right here is going to be a fabric that is water resistant. You can tell the water doesn't soak into the fabric. It kind of rolls on top of it. All right, so you have your standard finishes. These are finishes that are pretty much added to every single piece of fabric. It's the standard finishes, okay? So this is kind of the process that goes into. So your standard finishes are going to be stain-resistant finishes that is added to fabrics to help them so they don't retain stains. And then also flame retardant. This is given so that when you burn a piece of fabric, if you were to light a piece of fabric on fire, one that doesn't have a flame retardant and one that does, the one that does have a flame retardant, yes, it's still going to burn because it's fire, but it burns a lot slower. Okay, so it's a little bit safer. Wear and tear just helps reduce wrinkling, shrinkage, and fading. And then your anti-static is given so when you don't lay on it, your hair doesn't stand straight up in the air. So that's very common to put that on fabrics and couches, furniture, carpet, things like that. Okay, and then you have decorative finishes. This could be anything that are added finishes. This is going to produce a softer hand or feel. A softening finish makes your fabric softer. Stiffening finishes make your fabric harder, and they add a crispiness to the surface, so it depends on what kind of look you're going for. Flocking adheres tiny fibers to the surface in patterns, and then etch or burnout is when prints or fabric with acid are treated with acid that burns that one fiber, usually cotton in a blend, to produce a sheer pattern. Okay, then you have your different dye methods. You've got yarn dyed. This is where colors are added to the yarn. Piece dyed, where color is added to the entire piece of fabric. Solution dyed is where it's added to a fiber solution and then fed through a spinneret. I'm going to show you pictures, don't worry. And then a printed is where one design is darker on one side and it's sent through a fabric printer. Remember, if I'm going too fast, you can pause this video at any time and take notes. Here's pictures of yarn dyed. Okay, the actual yarn is dyed, not the fabric. Here is piece dyed, where the entire piece of fabric is dyed in dye, not yarns. Yeah?
What's that?
It's color. My niece Emma is sitting on my lap while I'm teaching this lesson.
What's that?
That's fabric. It's being dyed.
It's yellow.
It's yellow.
What's that?
It's fabric.
It's blue.
It is blue.
What's that?
It's fabric.
It's orange.
It's orange, yes.
What's that?
That's fabric.
It's orange.
It is orange. Can you say hi to everybody? Okay, here is a picture of solution dyed. This is where the fabric is, the fibers are forced through a machine called a spinneret, and inside the spinneret there's going to be a solution that has the dye in it, and then it's fed through the spinneret, and then spun onto a spool. It's similar to yarn dyed, however it's done in a machine. And then you have your printed. It's sent through a fabric printer. You can always tell something's printed if you flip over the other side and there's nothing on the back. Like right now, I'm looking at a tablecloth right now, and the top of the tablecloth has lots of flowers on it. The back is white. That means that tablecloth was printed on a fabric printer. Okay. That is your textiles. And then stay tuned for our flooring lesson.